I found her in a seed pod, which is not a thing anyone believes the first time I say it, so I have learned to say it plainly and let the silence do the rest. It was harvest season in Dome 7, the light coming down gold and slow through the glass ribs, the way it does in the last hour before the dome dims for night cycle, and I was walking the grain rows when I saw something had come down through the upper vents that shouldn't have fit through them at all. A husk, silver, and split open like a fruit gone soft, and inside it, a child no older than a season, wrapped in something that was not cloth and was not skin, breathing like she had been holding her breath a very long time and had only just remembered how. I was 31 years old, and I did not have the first idea what to do with a baby. I had the second idea, though, which was to pick her up. I named her Solana because it was my mother's name, and because she looked, in that first hour, like she needed a name that already belonged to someone who had loved somebody well. Halcyon Reach doesn't ask many questions of the dome workers who raise a stray, and for a long time, nobody thought to ask about her at all. She grew up between the grain rows and the honeycomb frames, and by the time she was old enough to walk the paths on her own, everyone on the station simply understood that the moon-marked girl belonged, in whatever loose way anyone belongs to anyone, to me. She was, if I am being exact about it, strange in ways I stopped noticing, because I saw them every day. Her skin caught the dome light, and held it a moment longer than skin should, like she was lit faintly from beneath. A crescent mark sat pale under her collarbone, the kind of thing a station physician might have flagged if a station physician had ever looked closely enough, which none of them did, because who looks closely at a farmhand's ward? The council did, eventually. Word travels slow in a dome that grows its own food and buries its own dead, but it travels. By the time Solana was old enough to be spoken of instead of simply seen, 3 of the dome's ranking sons had found reasons to walk past our rows at the hour she'd be out among the honeycomb frames, and each of them found a different reason to stay. They courted her the way men court a thing they'd been told is valuable, without ever being told why. Verlant Koss brought her jewelry too fine for a girl who'd never worn shoes that fit. Osandre recited lineage at her, his own mostly, as though she might be moved by the size of a name that wasn't hers. Corin Vale simply stood near her at gatherings, and let the room assume, and the room did assume, because a girl who glows faintly in low light, and appeared from nowhere the dome could explain, is exactly the kind of prize men like that learn to want without ever wanting her. I kept doing what I had always done. I taught her which rows needed thinning and which could wait. I made her a sun hat, out of woven grain stalk the first summer, her skin blistered under the dome lamps, because nobody else had thought to ask if moonlight suited her the way station light didn't. I put a jar of the dome's hybrid honey in her hands when she was sad, and didn't ask her why, because I had learned by then that Solana told you things when she was ready, and not one breath before. They called me the moon groom around the mess hall, not kindly. A farmhand who thought a found girl owed him something, they said, though I'd never once told her she owed me a thing beyond helping me finish the east row before the light dimmed. I let them say it. I had raised her through fevers and long nights, and the particular grief of a child who somehow knows, in her bones, that she is not where she is supposed to be, and I had no interest in explaining myself to men who wanted her for the light she gave off, and not for the person underneath it. The decree came on a gray administrative morning, delivered by a Dominion envoy in a ship none of us in Dome 7 had names for. It confirmed what the physicians should have caught years earlier: the birth crescent, the light beneath her skin, the bloodline it belonged to. Solana Vray was, by an old and exacting lunar reckoning, the last confirmed heir of a line the Dominion had given up as extinct. She was to be reclaimed. The word they used was reclaimed, as though she were a shipment misrouted decades ago, and finally located. The suitors' courting turned, after that, into something closer to a bidding war conducted in front of her, rather than for her. Verlant petitioned to accompany her to the capital. Ossen produced a genealogy that claimed some thin, convenient tie to lunar nobility of his own. Corin simply started calling her Your Grace to her face, as though a title could make up for 11 years of never once asking what she liked to eat. I did not petition anything. I kept teaching her the East Row. There was a stretch of ground behind the honeycomb frames where she had always gone to practice the small, private things a girl works out alone. A kind of dome dance she'd taught herself, arms tracing shapes none of us had names for, sometimes half the night when sleep wouldn't come. Corin found it once and brought 2 of his friends to watch, laughing before she'd even finished, calling it a fitting show for a bride he meant to win. I did not raise my voice to him. I only moved the grain cart to block the path the next morning, and the morning after that, until the 3 of them stopped finding it worth the walk. Solana never asked me why the cart had moved. She only kept dancing, and I kept finding reasons to be nearby with work that didn't need doing quite yet. She came to me the night before the envoy ship was due, sitting where she always sat when something was too large to say standing up, on the crate by the honeycomb frames, and she asked me, in the plain voice she used for the things that mattered most, whether I thought she should go. I told her the truth, because it was the only thing I had ever given her that was worth anything. I told her I didn't know what waited for her on the moon, or whether a crown could be worn by someone who'd learned to be a person first, and a princess never, but that whatever she chose, I would not be the one telling her who she owed herself to. I told her the row would still be there if she came back to walk it. I did not ask her to stay. I have thought since that this may have been the truest thing I ever did for her. The morning the envoy ship settled into Dome 7's landing bay, the full council turned out beneath the glass, gold light pouring down over polished coats and rehearsed speeches. Verlant and Austin and Corin, arranged like men who had already decided how the story would be told afterward. Solana stood in the center of it in her plain dome clothes, the crescent under her collarbone catching the light the physicians had never bothered to notice. And when the envoy asked, with the particular condescension of someone reading from a very old script, whether any here could claim to have stood beside her, she did not look at the 3 men who had spent a year composing themselves for exactly that question. She looked at me, standing at the back by the grain cart where farmhands stand, and she said that the only one who had ever stood beside her, plainly, without asking what it would earn him, was the man who had pulled her out of a broken seed pod and given her his mother's name instead of a title. She said it once, without raising her voice, the way she said the things that mattered most, and the gold light held on her a long moment before anyone in that crowded bay remembered to breathe. Then she came to me, in front of the council and the envoy and the 3 men who had nothing left to say, and she pressed the woven sun hat back into my hands, the same one, mended twice over 11 years, and told me to keep the east row for her, because she meant to come back and walk it, whatever the moon turned out to want from her first. I have kept it. I keep it still, though the dome has dimmed for night cycle more times now than I care to count, and the honeycomb frames have needed replacing twice, and the mess hall has long since stopped calling me anything at all. I do not know, some evenings, whether the row is a promise or a habit I've let myself believe is one. But I walk it anyway. Every morning the dome light comes up gold and slow, because a man learns, if he is patient and plain and willing to be laughed at by better-dressed men, that some kinds of waiting are not wasted, even when you cannot yet see what they were for.